AI software is really having a moment this year, so I decided to put ChatGPT to the test. Yep. Companies are coming up with AI platforms to help create personalized meal plans. Since ChatGPT is a well-known free option, I decided to put it to the test. Since blood sugar balancing is such a core foundational piece of nutrition, I wanted to see if ChatGPT could make a 3-day blood sugar balancing meal plan. And to take my subjectivity out of it, I even wore a continuous glucose monitor during this time to track my blood sugar. There's some uncertainty about the utility of CGMs for non-diabetics, but paired with my subjective experience of hunger and blood sugar related symptoms, I think this will be a decent approximation of how my blood sugar reacts. Now, for reference, generally a blood sugar spike is considered a rise of 30 points or 30 milligrams per deciliter within the first 2 hours after eating your meal. There's a lot more nuance than that, of course, but for the sake of this experiment, I'm just gonna track my blood sugar for the 2 hours after my meals and snacks. Now, of course, a quick disclaimer that this is just how my blood sugar and my body responded to these meals. There's no guarantee that your body's gonna respond the same way. So make sure that you're still working with a licensed healthcare provider who is well-versed in blood sugar and nutrition before you make any major dietary changes. And don't worry, I'll include the full recipes in the downloadable PDF. For breakfast on day 1, ChatGPT recommended a quinoa breakfast bowl with berries and cinnamon. I quickly whipped up some almond milk by combining 1.5 cups of water with 1.5 tablespoons of almond butter because I couldn't find any store-bought almond butter without added sugar at my local store here in Tallinn. I drizzled a little almond milk on 1/2 cup cooked quinoa and topped it with the recommended cinnamon and 1/2 cup mixed berries. Even from the ingredient list, I knew this would not be filling enough, but I persevered for the sake of the experiment. It wasn't my favorite. We'll see how satiated I am from this. Fortunately, my blood sugar did stay extremely stable here, but unfortunately, I was hungry when I started eating, hungry when I finished eating, and remained hungry until lunchtime. I really think that breakfast could be more balanced. It barely had any fat or protein, and as a result was very low in calories. Not a great start, but let's see if ChatGPT can redeem itself. For lunch on day 1, we had chicken breast, roasted vegetables, and quinoa. I made enough for 2 servings. I used the suggested vegetables, peppers, carrots, and zucchini. I added a little olive oil when roasting the vegetables and seasoned them with curry powder, cayenne, salt, and pepper. Since we don't have a grill, I seasoned the chicken breast with the same seasoning as the vegetables and followed Chef Serena Wolf's recipe for idiot-proof chicken breasts on the stove. Basically, you sear one side, then flip it and cook it covered over low heat for 10 minutes. Then keeping it covered, you remove it from the heat and let it sit in the pan for 10 more minutes. I have been following this recipe for years and it results in fully cooked, juicy chicken breasts every time. I will link to her instructions in the description box below. As for the quinoa, I had plenty left over from breakfast, so I measured out the servings to make sure we were within the meal plan's recommendations and piled it all on plates for lunch. My first thought was that this was an extremely low-fat meal, which was a little concerning, but it was otherwise similar to meals we eat regularly in our home. While the blood sugar elevation from this meal is perfectly safe, the significant drop about an hour after eating is a sign that my body might have released more insulin than it needed for this meal. We call this reactive hypoglycemia, and the body was expecting more calories to come in. I don't think this is because of the lunch itself. I think from my own experience that it's probably from a smaller breakfast. So even though lunch was balanced and filling, I was still behind on calories for the day and my blood sugar was a little bit low. Moving on to our snack on day 1. Afternoon snack was very easy to pull together. It was just Greek yogurt with a little bit of honey and sliced almonds. For this snack, there was barely a blip on my blood sugar. Things are definitely looking more stable here. For day 1's dinner, I cooked some brown rice in my rice cooker with Italian seasoning, garlic powder, smoked paprika, and red pepper flakes. I also made the lemon dill yogurt sauce as per ChatGPT's instructions with Greek yogurt, fresh dill, lemon juice, garlic, and a bit of salt and pepper. Next, I seasoned some salmon with salt and pepper and baked it on 350 degrees Fahrenheit for approximately 12 minutes. While that was cooking, I chopped asparagus and steamed it until it was fork tender, which took about 3 minutes. If this were my meal plan, I would have just tossed the asparagus into the oven with the salmon. That would have saved on dishes, and roasted asparagus is way better than steamed asparagus. But we are following the meal plan. This dish was simple and tasty and definitely filling, and the yogurt sauce really helped to flavor the steamed asparagus. As you can see from this chart, dinner was also nice and stable with a relatively flat curve. Okay, moving on to day 2. For breakfast on day 2, we made a vegetable and cheese omelet. I chopped up the tomatoes and spinach and gave them a quick saute in the skillet with some dried basil, smoked paprika, salt, and pepper. Then I set them aside. Next, I whisked together the eggs with a splash of soy milk, some salt, and pepper. To make the omelets, I added just a touch of olive oil to a skillet over very high heat and added about half the eggs and let that cook for about a minute, then added half the vegetable mixture and a sprinkle of feta cheese. I folded it over and cooked it until the eggs were no longer runny. Repeat for the second omelet and you've got breakfast. In one small deviation from the meal plan, I decided to steal an apple from our afternoon snack and split it between us to have for breakfast. Although it looks like my blood sugar took a significant dip, this is actually a pretty stable curve. Lunch on day 2 was a chickpea salad with lemon tahini dressing. I started by making the lemon tahini dressing with tahini, fresh lemon juice, olive oil, 1 clove of garlic, salt and pepper to taste, and a touch of water to thin it out. Next, I chopped up the cucumber, the red onion, and the grape tomatoes. I had a mix of red and yellow tomatoes here, which were so pretty. I also drained and rinsed the chickpeas. Then I combined all the ingredients in a large bowl and topped it off with some of the dill we had left over from yesterday. This was so colorful, which made me very excited. I added 2 cups of mixed greens to each bowl and topped each with about 2 cups of the salad. This made way more food than we could consume in one sitting, so we left about 1.5 cups of the chickpea mixture behind for another day. Again, after lunch, we have a little bit of mild reactive hypoglycemia here. This dish was relatively high in complex carbs with only a moderate amount of protein. And as you can see from how quickly Zach ate his salad,
this is how much salad that I have left on my plate, and that's how much Zach has.
It tastes good.
he really enjoyed it, but was also very hungry at this point in the day. For snack time, I had the other half of the apple along with some almond butter. I was pretty hungry at this point and went back for even more almond butter for a total of about 2 tablespoons, which was still within the meal plan. After this snack, my blood sugar was looking a little funky, but it's still a stable curve. Dinner on day 2 was a pretty straightforward meal of steak and veggies. I prepped the Brussels sprouts by cutting off the ends and just cutting them in half. Then I seasoned them with olive oil, salt, and pepper. For the sweet potatoes, I cut them into wedges and seasoned them with olive oil, salt, cayenne, and smoked paprika. I cooked the sweet potatoes in a 450 degree Fahrenheit oven for about 25 minutes, flipping halfway. And for convenience, I cooked the Brussels sprouts at the same temperature for about 15 minutes, stirring those halfway as well. Now for the steak, although grilled steak was recommended, we don't have a grill. So instead I cooked these in a carbon steel skillet on the stovetop. I used ghee since that was the high heat cooking fat that I had on hand, and seasoned them with salt and pepper. These steaks took about 4 minutes on each side. We don't eat a ton of steak here, but this was delicious with the roasted Brussels sprouts and sweet potatoes, and I would happily make this again. This meal is the highest my blood sugar went during this 3-day experiment. Although it was a little high, it was still under the 30-point spike. Although this is perfectly fine and safe for me, this is a meal that I would question giving to someone who does have some sort of blood sugar dysregulation. Sweet potatoes aren't a low glycemic food, so I'm sure that's the culprit here. We have arrived at day 3, the last day of our meal plan. The breakfast on day 3 is chia pudding, so that had to be made the night before. Just combine a 1/4 cup of chia seeds with 1 cup of almond milk, and I added a touch of honey. You can do this in a jar or a bowl and mix it well and then let it sit overnight. In the morning, we topped it with sliced bananas, some leftover mixed berries, and chopped walnuts, which I toasted in a dry skillet for like 3 to 5 minutes before crumbling them onto the chia pudding. This breakfast was fast and colorful and much more filling than the quinoa bowl. And as you can see, my blood sugar preferred this one as well. Lunch on the last day was this colorful quinoa salad with mixed vegetables, grilled chicken, and feta cheese. Since I had these large chicken breasts, I decided to bake them. I seasoned them with olive oil, salt, pepper, and garlic powder, as well as an Italian herb blend. Then into the oven at 450 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, they recommended grilling the chicken, but we don't have a grill. While the chicken was cooking, I prepared the salad dressing by whisking together lemon juice, olive oil, and some salt and pepper. Next, I finely chopped the vegetables. I minced half a red onion, half a cucumber, and a red bell pepper, while Zach cut up the rest of the grape tomatoes. We added all the veggies to the bowl with the dressing, along with cooked quinoa and feta cheese. I topped it with a bit of fresh basil from our sad little basil plant, and around that time, the chicken was done. I always use a meat thermometer. Then I set it aside to rest for a couple of minutes before slicing it up and adding it to the quinoa salad. This was another colorful meal and made at least 3 full servings, so we packed up the leftovers for another day. This quinoa salad with chicken looks like there's a lot going on, but there's enough fiber and protein to keep the curve flat and provide sustained energy. For our snack on day 3, it was one of my favorites. Rice cakes with mashed avocado. I was kicking myself a little bit here because we were supposed to save a few of the grape tomatoes to slice and add on top, but we used them all in the quinoa salad, so instead we just topped ours with everything bagel seasoning. This is a snack I have relatively regularly anyway. I love it, and I was happy to enjoy it on this meal plan. The curve for this snack surprised me. I'm not entirely sure when my blood sugar dipped a bit before rising, but it was a pretty mild dip and not at all concerning. Dinner on the last day was chicken thighs with roasted cauliflower and quinoa. Starting with the cauliflower, I broke the florets into small pieces, then seasoned them with olive oil, salt, a curry powder blend, and black pepper. I tossed it all together to coat and then spread it out on 1 or 2 pans. It was a bit too crowded on my sheet pan, so I put some of it on this oven-safe skillet as well, and then roasted all the cauliflower on 450 degrees Fahrenheit for about 25 minutes. For the chicken, I followed my own recipe for crispy chicken thighs, which is a slower stovetop frying method. I seasoned the chicken with salt, pepper, and smoked paprika, and then cooked it skin side down on a medium heat for about 15 to 20 minutes. This allows the fat to render off and the skin to get nice and crispy. Then you flip the chicken over and cook for 10 to 20 minutes on the other side or until the chicken is fully cooked. And for the quinoa, on day 1, I had cooked a whole pound of quinoa for the week, so we finished that off with tonight's dinner. Again, this was a delicious meal. Curried roasted cauliflower is one of my favorites. I highly recommend it. And for our final blood sugar graph, we've got a very stable and relatively flat curve, which means very balanced blood sugar. So overall, as you can see, ChatGPT did a pretty good job of keeping my blood sugar stable. The meal recommendations didn't cause any blood sugar spikes, which was the primary goal here. All of the dishes were easy to put together. I liked that this meal plan provided lots of colors and variety. The primary downside of this meal plan was that some of the dishes were a little bit low in overall calories or low in an important macronutrient like fat or protein, which I absolutely felt in terms of hunger and irritability. For many people, these lows can be just as dangerous and disruptive as blood sugar spikes. It will often result in things like disrupted sleep, strong cravings, especially for carb-heavy foods, and just poor energy throughout the day. In the downloadable PDF where I have all of the recipes, I've also included some of my tips and recommendations for making this ChatGPT meal plan a little bit more satiating and less likely to cause any blood sugar lows. Now, I wouldn't say that AI is set to replace healthcare providers and nutritionists and dietitians anytime soon, but I do think this was a pretty decent meal plan. You also have the option to make it more customizable by asking ChatGPT to use certain ingredients or omit other ingredients, so I think it's not a terrible idea if you're trying to come up with a meal plan. Now, of course, there's the danger of asking the wrong thing or getting the wrong information because this is not a provider who knows your story, so you may end up with meals that are too high or too low in certain nutrients and aren't a good fit for you. But in general, ChatGPT, you did okay. The only other thing missing from this meal plan is dessert. I did not think to ask ChatGPT for dessert until I was already editing this video, so that might just have to be another video. I hope this was useful. I hope you get some good tips, maybe some new recipes, and thanks as always for being here. I'll see you in the next video. And split it for breakfast and split it in half to have with our breakfast. I hope this was useful for you, and oh.